way beyond that, the Court of Appeals. You might say, well, this can relate to someone like Jeffrey Seif, who has legal authorization to bind and loose, to arrest, to so forth. But while I can't help but escape the connotations, it would grab someone like me because of a variety of things that I'm into. It has applications beyond those of us that just manage law. And I want you to look at it with me, and I'm going to begin with the legal implications and applications, but then kind of push it to human experience beyond those that just have juridical authorization. In Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 18, judges and officers, he says, you were to appoint within all your gates that Adonai your God is giving you according to your tribes. So we're kind of looking forward over the horizon into the new land. We're looking at a group that's wandered around for 40 years, and they're kind of looking over the horizon with Joshua. They're going to go into a land, and there's going to be cities, there's going to be counties, there's going to be districts, and they're told to appoint judges and officers. And they are to judge the people with righteous judgment. Not just that individuals are given de jure authorization, juridical authorization, to impose to hear cases and impose fines and punishments, but they're told that they are to judge with righteous judgment, that to approach the task with a sense of discipline and equity. In verse 19, you are not to twist justice. You must not show partiality or take a bribe. For a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and distorts the words of the righteous. It's extremely important that those that are vested with authorization in this manner not be manipulated underhandedly. It has disastrous consequences. And then, having said that, in verses 18 and 19, as if to seal it, to even more firmly impress it, he says in verse 20, justice, justice you must pursue. Now, the reason why he said it twice isn't because he has a stuttering problem. I like to say this in the English language, especially in computers. There are ways that we stress something. We can be typing along if we want to stress something. We can underline it. We have the option of italicizing it. We can put it in boldface, a bigger font. We can put it an exclamation point. There's ways that moderns have of saying something and accentuating the importance of it. Well, without having those tools, when you're retrojecting back in time 3,500 years, and we're opening up a document that's give or take 3,500 years, it depends on how you date Moses, whether the Exodus is around 1450 or the mid-1200s BC, take your pick. But we're well over 3,000 years old here beyond with anyone's estimate. And not only is it stressed, but it's finalized. Justice, justice, says it twice. You must pursue, so that you may live and possess the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Success in life is predicated upon being just, which is one of the reasons, by the way, why Jewish sages, while referring to the Jewish religion as being monotheistic, it's described with the adjective ethical monotheism. It's just not a spiritual religion. You know, in today's economy, individuals are apt to talk about my personal relationship with Jesus, my personal spirituality, that there's no such thing, or it's half a thing. Jesus said it as much, as you did it to one of the least of these, my brethren, you did it unto me. That there's something about being religious in a pious sense. It's not just lived out in some vertical dimension with us here and God up there. It's lived out horizontally in the way that we interact with other human beings. and the way that we interact with other human beings, just to push a general application, it needs to be just, fair, equitable, decent, honest, and earnest. And the way that we attend to our business, whatever our business is. I mean, it's explicit elsewhere in biblical literature. If you're a merchant there in the marketplace and someone's buying a pound of grain, don't get a 14-ounce weight and put 16 ounces on it so people think they're buying 16 ounces, but they're just getting 4. I mean, there's ways that people cheat people. There's not being disingenuous in the way that we treat one another. People say things and statements or verbal agreements. Yes, I'm going to do this and that. And don't say things that you don't stand behind and do. It creates social disequilibrium if there's a chasm between the way that we represent ourselves and the way that we perform. And truth of the matter is, there are a lot of people that talk about their personal relationship with Jesus in a personal, private, spiritual sense. When things are shipwrecked socially, and it really begs the question how that can be. To what extent can someone really claim to be just so engaged with the divine, but be so disengaged with other human beings? Well, while that's generally true, I want to just alight upon a few things and then leave the text and come back to it and just tell a story. Once again in verse 18, you see that the author beckons the appointment of judges and officials. When you have communities, people are going to have to be authorized to perform certain tasks. And they're to judge righteously, it says in verse 18. And by the way, to be righteous, I mean the word righteous is kind of kicked around in modernity. A guy will say, man, she's really righteous. You know, it's a way of just a general way of flattering someone. Or someone's really righteous. You know, they're righteous. They go to church on Sunday morning and Sunday night and Wednesday night. And if there's a revival on Monday and Tuesday night as well. Boy, so-and-so is really righteous. We tend to equate righteous with being churched. That is, that to be righteous is to be committed in some social sense to a participation in a Christian experience. You know, Wade, this message is all about you. I'm tempted to start all over again now that you're here. Nice of you to drop by. You know, it's all, I'm just thinking about you the whole time, and nice of you to drop by. What's that? Sure you are. Yeah, okay, now you run out of here now. It's talking about judges, by the way, a little conviction. He's headed for the door. Okay, he doesn't want to hear it. I understand. It was nice of him to bring his mother. Yes, I'll hand him that. He was nice enough to bring his mother. Okay? Well, I'm going to speak loud so you can hear me wherever you are. You can't hide, Wade.
Judge Wade tonight.
What's that?
Judge Wade.
Yes, that's Judge Wade Birdwell there. Okay, I guess he's under conviction and just couldn't handle it tonight. He says here that we're to judge with righteous judgment, to not twist justice, to not show partiality. Later on in the reading, to inquire diligently into matters before jumping to conclusions. Treat people fairly, inquire diligently, be just. Justice. How much injustice do we do? We make judgments about people. We assume things about people. We assign motives to people. We presume to know way more than we really know because we think we're smart. We jump. well, she's this and he's that and so-and-so's this and that. And, I mean, in so many ways we talk about people we don't really even know, about circumstances we're not privy to, about issues we're basically clueless, but we're jumpy. Truth of the matter is, it's not just Wade who makes judgments. There's a sense in all of us as we make our journey from the womb to the tomb, we're assessing people and circumstances and making judgments. Now you got to do it. You can't not do it. You know, it's if someone's dating, they want to know if this is a prospect for the future. They're going to want to penetrate deeply. Who is this? What is this? And make certain decisions about the acceptability of this moving forward, and then want to get some sense of the divine in the process. There's a business arrangement. Someone's considering a partnership, a deal. Who am I dealing with business-wise? We're expending time and energies. There's hopes and aspirations kind of being welded into this enterprise. Who is this? What is this? And we're making decisions in a variety of ways. The importance of really getting a clear and clean look at something before making decisions. That's why, by the way, someone will go to a physician and will describe. The physician will look at you and observe. Someone will describe, they'll listen, and then they'll touch, palpation, they'll hear, auscultation, put on the scope, okay, cough. Someone's trying to get some preliminary sense of what's going on the basis of what a person describes, on the basis of what they can find out through just a cursory examination. It can be a visual examination, employing touch, sound, the combination of all of that. Then we'll come up with a tentative hypothesis about what we think we might be looking at. And then you send it out for tests to see if the tests corroborate the hypothesis based on one's assessment of the person and the symptoms. And then if the tests corroborate it, then proceed on the basis of acceptable standards, of best practices. There's a sense in which part of being professional is taking a crisp, clear look at something and then making a decision, but not really making the decision to advance before you have all the information. You know, someone asked me how many people I've taken to jail as a police officer. How many guilty people have I taken to jail over 20 years a cop? I said I've never taken a guilty person to jail. It's not even my call to decide whether someone is guilty or innocent. There's a trier of the facts elsewhere. All that I do is make a decision based on what's called probable cause. If I think there are specific and articulable facts that were a reasonable person to believe that a particular crime was committed and that person was responsible for it, then based on probable cause, I take them. They go, they go before a judge in the morning. They bond out. They get their day in court. They get their representation. If they can't afford it, the state will provide someone, not just the prosecutor. And there's a sense in which, let's see if we can sort this out. And there's the option, you want to judge, a combination of judge and jury, there's a way that it goes. And then when the person is found guilty, if they're found guilty, there's another trial. Not to decide guilt or innocence, but the attorneys convene, let's look at mitigating circumstances when we consider sentencing. I know of a case in New England where a woman was found guilty of murdering her husband, point blank, went into the bedroom, she was convicted of murder. And when it came time for sentencing, it was time served. He let her out. You go, that must have been an incredible literal judge. No, what it is you look, are there mitigating circumstances? The guy was going crazy. He was a neo-Nazi skinhead. He was beating up his wife. There's a 12, 13-year-old daughter she had from her previous marriage. He's threatening to harm her, to assault her. It looks like that sort of stuff's in play. The woman said, I've had enough. Her attorney was able to articulate that the guy was a bad actor. Now, maybe you as a judge wouldn't have let her out like that, but it's a reasonable and prudent person, an arbitrator, decided that the time she served in jail was sufficient. Well, Individuals that have de jure authorization or authorization to make decisions in law and medicine or in life or whatever, it's important to look at something crisply, clearly, and cleanly, and to make a decision according to Deuteronomy chapter 16, verses 18 and on. A decision that's righteous, a decision where there's no twisting, where there's no partiality, and there's a premium, it says at the end of it, justice, justice. Now, what I want to do is pivot away from the text for a moment and then go back to it when I want to revisit it to consider personal applications. And I just want to tell you something of a professional story. Not to be showy, though, you know, when you're graduating, you kind of get your victory lap. And maybe there's a little more hubris than would otherwise be there. And, you know, Barry and I are leaving next Wednesday. I'm going to Cambridge University, where I labored for years in a very difficult school. I'm able to graduate finally. There's a relief with that. I graduated honors at the top of my class in the dissertation. You know, that's a little boasty there. But what I was interested in my dissertation there was ethics. And I was interested in this text, derivatives of it. Now, I want to tell you a little bit of a story. Here you're looking at literature that's over 3,000 years old. I want to talk to you about a new program that's kind of making its headway in criminal justice. It's called procedural justice. I mentioned this. Heather Strang, the director of the Jerry Lee Center of Criminology at Cambridge University, sent me an article written by a few scholars a few weeks ago. She thought, it came out of the blue, she thought I'd be interested in it. And the article was related to something that the person who came, every year Cambridge gives the Robert Peel Award of Criminology. Now, Robert Peel was a noteworthy of a bygone era who wanted to professionalize policing. And so there's the award of the year, the Robert Peel Award in Evidence-Based Policing. And the keynote speaker at the conference was the fellow who was vested with the award, David Weisberg, who is a professor at Hebrew University in the Faculty of Law, who came then and presented at the University of Cambridge. And the reason why she thought I would be interested in that and the reason why she sent me the research article that Weisberg and others did is because it correlated with the thesis that I did at Cambridge, of which she was a reader. So she was acquainted with the way I was thinking. She knew me personally because she was my advisor at the first year of the program. But then when I went to my dissertation segment of it all, I pivoted away from her and kind of lost contact. But she knew what I thought, but she was assigned to be one of the readers for my dissertation. So she knew the kind of stuff that I was getting my hands into intellectually and empirically, because it was a randomized control trial. It was all full of data. So she kind of knew that. In any case, Weisberg comes and gives the keynote address at the Cambridge University Society of Evidence-Based Policing. And she says, you know, he's saying some things that kind of remind me of you, Jeffrey, and here's the article that was published in an academic journal on what's called procedural justice. Procedural justice is what I want to talk to you about. Among other things, I'm being contacted by agencies in the Metroplex to do in-services for all the officers in those agencies on procedural justice. Started off in Waxahachie, where There they have 70-some officers, and I was asked if I could come. They wanted to do an in-service for all the officers, and then DeSoto, and then Hutchins, and then Lancaster, and it's kind of just taking on a life of its own. Can you please, all of our officers, we want you to come and talk to them about procedural justice. Now, procedural justice isn't something that I invented. It's something that's been discovered. And it's been demonstrated that those who practice it have much better results in dealing with the public, even with people they arrest. To illustrate, a variety of randomized control trials have been performed. I first ran into the first study done with the Chicago police at the University of Illinois up there. James Scogan. I looked at a published study where they took officers in the Chicago Police Department and they randomly assigned some to go to this training in what's called procedural justice. And others didn't receive the training in procedural justice. They were told to go do something else. And they thought they were getting procedural justice, but they didn't get it. There were individuals that were trained in a way of being, in social interacting with people, called procedural justice. It's kind of like a medical experiment. You're testing a drug. You get 5,000 people to test the drug. 2,500 of them get the drug. 2,500 get a placebo. There's nothing in it. And what it is you test it out longitudinally, and you see if, whatever you're testing for. Yes, the blood pressure was greatly improved. The cholesterol was greatly improved amongst those that took the drug as opposed to those that didn't. Once you have something that's been tried in a randomized control trial, which is the gold standard in social sciences, you have what's called efficacy. That is to say, based on the data, the trial proves up the efficacy of what's being offered, whether it's a drug for cholesterol or whether it's something else. In this case, police were assigned to a procedural justice trial. There were those that got it, the dosage, the medicine, training in procedural justice, and there were those that didn't. Okay. What they did then is they followed them out longitudinally for a year. Police go out, they take calls for service, their numbers are assigned to different cases, just calls for service, and then surveys were sent to those who interacted with the police. If you look at the respondents to the surveys, it was found that those who received what's called procedural justice were much more kindly disposed toward the police than those who didn't receive it, even if they were arrested. That is to say, the police show up on scene and he says this and he says that, you make a decision and the guy goes to jail. The point is the officers that were trained with what's called procedural justice, they fared better in the way they were perceived by the public, irrespective of the disposition of what they had responded to. You with me on that? So you have it in Chicago. I saw studies with Chicago police and other medium-sized and smaller agencies. When I was over in England, I was reading data out of Yale that's collecting all this stuff. A professor, I even wrote him about it. We interacted some because I thought it really was something that was really fascinating. In any case, so unbeknownst to me, Dave Weisberg, who's the head of criminology in Israel, he's a lead criminologist. And by the way, one of my professors at Cambridge University is also on the faculty of law at Hebrew University, and as well as being a professor at Cambridge, where he took his PhD and received his full professorship during my tenure there, Barak Ariel, an Israeli. In any case, so Professor Strang, Heather Strang, says, Jeff, I think you need to maybe look at this. And what it is, it's a study. It's a new study that was just completed on procedural justice. In this case, There's other departments that were being assessed, Houston in particular. So we're getting into Texas. So you're seeing studies that start here and there and there, but then it starts to multiply. And once you can bundle these studies together that are testing something that's comparable, then you can get into meta-analysis. You know, if one randomized control trial to test a drug, the efficacy of a drug, you know, there's 5,000 people in the experiment, 2,500 get the dosage, 2,500 get a placebo. The results of that drug test at 2,500 samplings at a population that size is reasonably good. You can make empirical deductions on the basis of 5,000 people. But now if you have big studies and small studies and medium studies and a number of them, there's a way to not just look at the veracity or the alleged truthfulness of one study. There's a way to look at those studies bundled together and see if all these different studies that are bundled together are corroborating the initial finding. That is to say, if you have 100 randomized control trials on what's called procedural justice, and it's showing 100% of the time or 90% of the time that it's showing a benefit, all that strengthens the claim that those that receive training in procedural justice perform better than those that don't. You with me on that? Now, what I want to give you are the basic 4 pillars of procedural justice. And arguably, if you look at police often go into highly charged moments. There's a lot of emotion, there's a lot of tension, things are unraveling. It's a miserable moment. And individuals go in there and are tasked with trying to sort it out and make a decision. Now, the 4 pillars for procedural justice, it's alleged that if you practice these things, in the context of doing your job, you're going to have a better outcome. That is, you're going to get a better result and you're going to be perceived better by others. But while that's arguably true for policing, this isn't a police class here this evening, it's a church house. Jeffrey, why are you talking about this? Well, here, this literature is talking about it. I'll make the case. What I want to do is give you the 4 pillars of procedural justice. And I believe that it not only improves that the relationships that police have with difficult people, but if people themselves just practice these 4 disciplines, that will help them to fare better in their interactions with other human beings, irrespective of whether you're arresting anybody or not. This is just skillful living. And what you're going to see when I'm done is how it correlates with what I just read. That what's this brand new thing that's being discovered is just what Moses talked about 3,000 plus years ago. The new discovery. In fact, it occurred to me while preparing for the message, after the Sabbath, I'm going to contact David Weisbert at Hebrew University of Jerusalem. I already have. Because when he got back to me, and I don't recall in the study him ever quoting this week's parashah, but I think he should have known it as an Israeli. I think he should have known it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and have a look at his email. I'm going to have a look at his study. And I'm wondering, even if this text isn't in there, as in it's being quoted, it's in there in that it's being practiced. Those 4 pillars, let me go through them. The first is listening. The first pillar in being procedurally just, when you go into a situation, is hearing. It's deeply listening to what others are saying. I know from being married to Barry for 7 years, and may my first wife rest in peace, being married for 30 years, I do know that if a woman doesn't feel like she's being listened to, she's not going to feel that she's being loved. People want to be heard. It's extremely important. And it's not only important that you hear people, it's important that in the process of conversating with people, you telegraph to them that you're hearing them. And a way you can do that is by actually listening, and people are very bad listeners. One of the reasons why we're very bad listeners is because we're very smart. We can speak at 125 words per minute, but we speak at what we think is 600 words per minute. So someone starts to talk to you, you're already assuming where they're going, and in your mind just waiting them to shut up because you've been preparing how you're going to respond. Even while you're listening to them, you're just giving a perfunctory performance for being there listening. Actually, in your own mind, you're just preparing what you're going to say as a response to your assumptions. Even when people talk, they don't even listen. We're horrible listeners. So one of the reasons why in the Newer Testament, Jesus over and again says, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. Now they do have ears, these biological things with drums and cones that vibrate. They hear noises that are syllables, and the mind has learned to recognize language. People hear. Now granted, at 67, I'm hearing less and less, but the point is I still can hear. I still got it. I'm too proud to get a hearing aid, but I got it. But, it's in the New Testament, Jesus, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. In the Old Testament, the statement that's definitive for Judaism is Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is God. There's a sense in which, God is screaming and people aren't listening. Can you wake up and smell the coffee? The problem, arguably, is we're bad listeners. And the problem is ubiquitous. Now, here, police are called into a situation. Okay, you go there, you separate the parties. Okay, man, let me talk to you. And really listening. Talk to you, really listening. The problem is cops oftentimes are men and feelings and emotions. They don't like that. There's tension. It upsets. It disturbs the man. Well, of course it's upsetting. They didn't call you over for coffee because they were in a great mood and just wanted to discuss how are things at the department. The reason why you're there's a crisis and people are sentient beings. Yes, they have feelings. Yes, they have emotion. Yes, the people get ramped up a little bit. And if you want to shut down in response to that because you're too good to hear it, well, who needs you? The procedural justice entails initially, when we're in various situations, to really endeavor to listen. To listen and to try and understand what the parties have to say. To listen. Extremely important. Well, officer, I didn't mean to do it. I did lash out. I slapped, I hit, and she fell backwards and hit her head. She's got a bruise there. I didn't mean. He did it. Doesn't mean he's a horrible person. You do have a Class A misdemeanor then. Someone has to go to jail. But the point is, listen, John, I'm not saying you're a bad person, but it is what it is, and we all make mistakes. But if you can listen to someone and treat individuals with a kind of humanity, there's a sense in which even if the outcome of the conversation doesn't go their way, the way they would wish, they don't charge that against your account. I had a situation today at work. This stuff comes up. There was one of my workers, a lieutenant, who superintends a campus. Someone, disrespected her. And I didn't like that. They kind of slapped her across the face in some verbal sense. Well, that doesn't comport with my sensibilities. It's one of the things that I like about a military structure. It's not a question of who's right or who's wrong in an argument. It's a question of who's who. If you're a corporal or a sergeant and the captain says something, if you don't like it, it's yes, sir, yes, ma'am. Maybe there's a way to write a complaint, but you have to keep comportment. You have to keep respect. You can't just come unglued and snap. So there's a breach of that sort of thing. It's like I heard the one party give their perspective and then I respond, well, I understood you to say. There's a sense in which before making judgments, if you're demonstrating that you're trying to get in there and understand someone's world and someone's perspective from their eyes, that someone is listening, endeavoring to do that. You're going to have to make a decision at the end of the day, and if someone has to go to jail, one of the parties is going to be disappointed. But if someone demonstrates listening, and empathic listening at that is, it reflects the ability to not just hear what they're saying, but to be able to demonstrate they hear the feeling associated with what they're saying. There's a sense in which you make a friend with someone even if the outcome doesn't go their way. So in procedural justice, the first thing is an active and empathic listening. Secondly, there's impartiality. And it's not just that someone is impartial, but the person that you're interacting with perceives that you're being impartial. Now, of course, if you're listening to someone empathically and interacting with them, they're going to be more apt to be trusting of you than otherwise. But it's really important to be perceived as impartial. You know, someone has they've been in this marriage for 12 years and at a certain place you don't know, you just got there 12 minutes ago. You know, you're walking into someone's world, into their moment, and you can't presume to know. It's like that. You're dispatched to a call for service. The dispatcher gives you a sound bite, you know, and you look in your computer as you're driving there, you know, whatever it is that was reported. In your mind, it's a 12-hour shift. It's hot. You're wearing all this heavy gear. You know, you're 10 hours into it. You're ready to go home. You had your overtime job that you worked the day before on top, and you're going to an overtime job. You're tired. Your marriage is on the rocks because you're working so much. You're not seeing the wife or the husband or whatever. You're stressed out anyways. And so you're driving there and you're hearing what the dispatcher says. You're looking at the computer. You're thinking, okay, I've been doing this now for 11 years. You're familiar with this kind of call, and you kind of know what to expect and to know what it is. By the time you get there, you have a lot of preconceptions based on experience and history. But nevertheless, even with that, it's important to approach every circumstance, every human being, with what's called in Latin a tabula rasa, a blank slate. The idea is that you can't just look at people statistically and empirically. There's a human being, there's an experience, and there's a moment. And it's best to not go into the moment with presumptions about what the outcome's going to be, and that you're very impartial in the way that you hear the parties out and make a decision. You can't just go, well, heck, you know, if you look at these domestic disputes, 97% of the time it's a male. Here's the male, you know, so I'll just hook him up. Maybe he's going to beat the rap, but he's not going to beat the ride. You know, 97%. Okay, well, who's to say this isn't one of the other 3%ers? You don't know that. That it's extremely important to not just jump to conclusions. It's important to present as an active listener. It's important to present impartially. That you're not partial to one party or another. And by the way, as I say this, you can just think about the points that I just made. You know, justice, you shall pursue, you shall inquire diligently. Don't take bribes. Don't let yourself be twisted. You have to be impartial in the way. I mean, what we're discovering in procedural, it's a troubling moment. You know, tension, law enforcement, government, there's a lot of fracture in culture. Here's this new thing, it's called procedural justice, this wonderful new thing. Yeah, this wonderful new thing. As soon as the biblical literature wants to talk about it, Your Honor.
Those two things are interrelated. You listen, you perceive.
Bingo. Okay, you're right. I'll tell you what, you come and do my conclusion. And I'll give you part of my big salary too. No, in fact, you come up and sum it up. You get the last word, and then you have to lead us in prayer. Okay? It's not. I'm not saying that to shut you up so I can finish my talk right now. But you know, I'd be interested in your perspective on it. Okay, so they are interrelated. All these things are intertwined. So the first, listening, and a real active listening. Now, I'm telling you, it's not just important for him, and it's not just important for me. I mean, it's important for you in dealing with people and circumstances. You look at a good salesman. You know, let's say you're a car salesman, and there's one guy in there, you know, that's you know, and he sells 3 times more per month than the others do. You wonder, well, that person's just a better salesman. How does he do it? Someone could say, well, he's just lucky. You know what I mean? He's jumping in all the rich-looking customers that are coming through the door, or he's this or that. No. What you'll find is the best salesmen are really good listeners. Problem is people walk into the dealership and the salesman, yeah, I have this car, this is the engine, this is this, and that he tells them everything that he thinks great about the car. Now, there's a place for knowing your product and giving voice to it, but you're a lot better when people come in, before talking to them about what the cars are all about, to find out what they're all about. If you listen to people, what brought you here? What are you looking for? Why a Cadillac? Why this SUV? What are your needs? What are your interests? If you just shut up and let people talk, they sell themselves the car. Because if you know exactly what they want, then what you can do is help them to get what they want, rather than make them buy what you want. In any case, the trick is listening. So listening, being impartial. The third is something that Sister Aretha sang about, R-E-S-P-E-C-T. And Sister Aretha was not the only person in the world that wants respect. Treating people with respect and dignity. I like to tell this story. I remember that, I arrested a guy in the middle of the night. And I was talking to him on the way to the jail. I kind of liked him. And I said, Don, when we got to the jail, I said, look, Don, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to bail you out. I said, I think you're a great guy. I'm going to bond you out personally. To tell you the truth, I even regret that I had to bring you here. And he was like, oh, man, no, you don't have to do that. It's all good. Okay. Years later, I'm sitting at a restaurant on Hampton Road and Interstate 20. And sitting there with a student at CF&I, and his dad came in town. We went out to lunch. And this guy walks by. This black guy walks by, and he's got like a ball cap sideways. He walks by, sees me, and then he comes back, and he looks at me, and he says, do I know you? Now, as I'm reaching for my bag that has the gun in it, because in police work, you don't always remember these people, but they always remember you. And he says, I know you. And then he smiled. And when he smiled, and I saw that rack of gold teeth and the chain there, I go, yeah. He says, yeah, I remember you. He says, you arrested me in the middle of the night. He goes, yeah. He goes, man, I haven't seen you for a while. I go, yeah. He says, I remember you, the guy that wanted to bail me out. That was crazy, dog. Yeah. He says, well, what are you doing here? I says, well, you saw me as a police officer, but, I'm a pastor too, and I'm a Bible college and seminary professor. And this guy here is a student of mine at the college, and then his dad, they wanted to go out to eat with me, so we're having a meal together. He says, you're a minister, sure enough. Where's your church? And, it's when I was pastoring a church meeting on Sunday morning. Where's your church? Well, I told him, and I got news for you. He goes home and tells his wife, who's a praying woman, praying for a breakthrough for her husband, and that old boy got his butt, his wife, and their family. They were in the front row of my church every week afterwards for week after week after week. It's a little bit of kindness, even if you're arresting someone, treating them with a little bit of respect. I mentioned this week. I did 2 in-services for 2 police departments on procedural justice. And I cited a story that was born out of a study that was done in London of 410 delinquents that were arrested. It was a trial. Half of them were arrested, and they were processed traditionally. They go to juvenile, and then they're incarcerated in juvenile. And I do believe there is this thing that's called a carceral state. There's a whole industry, a whole industrial complex absorbing people in. And people are making money in the process of processing people like that. So, I mean, half of these juveniles, 410 juveniles in London. This morning I was on the phone with the superintendent of the London Metropolitan Police. There's 40,000 officers there. He became my best friend in England because we were classmates together in Cambridge. Well, I digress. So there's a study, 410 juveniles, half of whom were processed conventionally. Okay, they go to juvenile, they get in there with the other juveniles, they get out of juvenile, they wind up getting arrested later, they go to jail. You know, they kind of get enculturated into criminogenic behavior activity. They were taken and processed. Half of them were processed through the system. The other half were just arrested and let go with nothing. Didn't do anything with them. Now, it's a longitudinal study. And the question was, what was going to become of these people 15 years later? Never mind when they're 15. Where are they when they're 30? And what they found was those that were taken and seized and processed, there's a certain percent of them that when they're 30, they're in the system, they're in jail, they're doing time. Okay? When you look at those that were just arrested and let go, and they did nothing, you know what they found? Much less of them were in jail later on. In other words, and it's a little beyond my pay grade to speak of neuroscience. You know, young people, you know, all this stuff isn't formed here fully with the males of the species until we're into the 20s, in the mid-20s. Eventually, the males of the species can shed these negative inclinations, these negative proclivities, you know, these criminogenic tendencies, delinquency. By the time you're in your mid-20s, you start to grow up a little bit. Eventually, you find a mate, you find work that you like, and people settle down. They found that by not tinkering with them, touching them, working on them, etc., just by leaving them alone, those that were left alone, statistically, out of the 410, fared better than the group that was being handled by the industrial complex to improve them. It's interesting. It's a little tangential, one could argue, because the point here is respect. You know, if someone makes a mistake, yeah, we all make a mistake. Just we can settle it on a verbal warning. You know, there's other way to do that. Well, anyways, I don't want to get too much into that. I want to keep it personal. People want to be respected. I always say that if you take like a meter, like a gauge, and there's a needle there, and then when it gets real hot, the needle goes over into the red zone, and the meter, the red zone, boy, the steam is building, the pressure is building and building. For me, when I feel that I'm being disrespected, that needle goes right over into that red zone. And if I still feel that someone's disrespecting me, that right away I take a jolt. And I think that's a lot with the males of the species. I can speak to that. I can't speak to the females of the species because I'm not one. All I know is I think there's male and female. Now I know today there's supposed to be 20 different varieties in between, but let's just keep it simple with the two. I know for me, and even if you look at biblical literature, even in giving voice to how the sexes are to interact with each other, you have in Pauline literature, not just with him, but other authors in the New Testament, Paul on a few occasions, you know, husbands, love your wives. Wives, respect your husband. It's interesting. The word respect is used. It's adjudged to be rather important. In any case, procedural justice, taking pains to listen, taking pains to be impartial, taking pains for as much as possible to be respectful. Truth of the matter is, let's say if I'm out there on the street and I'm arresting someone shooting up drugs, selling drugs or shooting up drugs. These cops had a fit, actually. You ever say something and there's rumblings in the group that And that was that I mentioned that when, when I went through the process to become a police officer, there's a personal history statement you got to fill out. And it's very intrusive, to find out what the person's all about. And there's a sheet there about drugs, and it listed all the drugs. And there was a place there for you to check if you've ever used those drugs, and then how many times you did it. And there were two guys I called over. One, Wayne Nero, he became a chief of police. He was a lieutenant then, but he wound up becoming the chief of police in Fredericksburg. Now he's a city manager. And then there was Smith, Carl Smith, who was a sergeant then, who's now the chief of police in Midlothian. I called them both over. Lieutenant, sergeant, what do you want? You see this sheet of paper here about the drugs? Yes. I said, it notes here every drug imaginable, and you want to know how many times that I did it. How many times someone did it? They go, that's right, we can read. I said, look, there's nothing on this sheet that I haven't done. There's nothing I've not smoked, snorted, or shot in my veins, or pills that I haven't taken. And I'm looking through the list. And if you want to know how many times I did it, does anybody have a calculator by any chance? Anybody have a calculator by any chance? And those guys thought that was the craziest thing they'd ever heard. I was younger then, a little younger and dumber. I was younger, but the man that's looking to be a police officer is in his young 40s. He's not a teenager anymore. Those inclinations have long been shed. And with that said, there have been times that I've dealt with people out there on the streets, and I've just discovered they were involved in things that I was involved in too. Let's just be real honest and human about this. And in any case, in dealing with people, listening, being impartial, being respectful, the fourth pillar in procedural justice is trustworthy motives. That being perceived as trustworthy. Now, a lot of people are guarded. If you take a line and you have zero, dead zero, and then there's +1, +2, +3, +4, all the way out to +10. And then here's absolute zero, -1, -2, -3, all the way to -10. What it is when I go interact with someone, okay, I'm a police officer, I'm called there for the first time, I present. I want to be perceived as beginning at absolute zero in their estimation and perform in such a way where I finish up, I'm at +3 or 4. That is to say that by virtue of their experience with me, they've gone from zero, because obviously they didn't know me, they've gone from zero and over to +3 or +4. You with me on that? But the reality is that people don't begin with people at zero. If you look at culture, for instance, if you look at the experience of African Americans in America, where there has been police abuse, it's not the experience that I've seen today, but I used to show at the police academy when I was an instructor then, now I'm an administrator. When I teach courses on professionalism and ethics, or the U.S. Constitution, I made them watch black and white TV clips from what happened at Selma, Alabama. I make them watch where Rodney King got his butt kicked and everything. I mean, just look at that. And it's easy to say, well, that was back then, this is today, the world has changed, and in many respects it has, but those thought processes still live on in people. I want people to look at me and see me at absolute zero and have the opportunity to earn +1, +2, +3, +4. But the reality is I can show up into a situation, I'm not at zero, I'm already beginning at -8. I'm already beginning at -8. That to say that not really being perceived with trustworthy motives, a kind of inherent distrust. And per the judge's point, these things all kind of sort of do go together. But to endeavor to take pains to be perceived with trustworthy motives. I want you to look at the text again. I've talked a little long here. Just once again to revisit this. And then I'll pivot, Judge. You come on up here with closing reflections and say a closing prayer, if you would, please. If you look in Deuteronomy chapter 16, judges and officers you to appoint within all your gates that the Lord your God is giving you. and they are to judge the people with righteous judgment. You are not to twist justice. You must not show partiality or take a bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and distorts the words of the righteous. Justice, justice, you must pursue. I would commend to you this evening that justice, or what we're calling procedural justice today, about listening, being impartial, being respectful, being trustworthy. I think I'm hearing biblical literature say 3,500 years ago what this new thing that's changing interactions with the world today, procedural justice. I think procedural justice itself has its roots in Judeo-Christian ethics. And as I'd said, and I don't want to continue to beat the point to death, it doesn't just apply to police, guys like me or the people I talk to. I don't think it applies simply to the judge. But if you will, Judge, come on, the last word's yours. If you'll come and take a moment and speak and close us up in prayer, and then I'll come. Then Susan, why don't you come back and do the Lord's Supper and the offering and all the rest. And may the Lord bless the ministry of the word. Your Honor, if I show up in your courtroom, are you going to share the bench with me?
Are you going to say all rise?
No.
No.
Okay, all rise.
No.
No, yeah. Here, take this.
That's fine. That's fine. You think I might say something on Facebook now? No. One of the things that we honestly don't get, when you first become an elected judge in the state of Texas or an appointed judge, they have what they call baby judges school. And some of what you've been talking about here today are some of the things that we are emphasized for us with regard to being a judge. I've been both a trial judge, I was a district judge here in Tarrant County for 7 years. I've been an appellate judge, kind of different skill sets. But the four things that you've identified here and identified in the Word still apply. But in thinking through this, listening to you, it all really still comes down to the second commandment from Jesus, and that is, treat others the way that you yourself would want to be treated. If you want to be listened to, if you want to make sure that somebody you're interacting with understands your situation or your position, then you need to accord them the same treatment. If you want to be impartial, perceived as impartial, or you want somebody to treat you impartially, then you need to accord them the same privilege. If you wish to be respected, you need to accord them respect. And if you wish to be considered to be trustworthy, you need to treat someone as being trustworthy. The last aspect, trustworthy, that's something that really you need to earn. And it's hard to earn it in an individual, episodic interaction with somebody. It's very hard to earn, okay? So if I am having a hearing or an oral argument where I've never had a witness or a party or an attorney before me before, it's hard for me to know exactly whether or not the information that's being imparted to me is trustworthy or not, because I don't know that individual, okay? They haven't had an opportunity to earn that type of trust from me in that regard, and vice versa. If they've never been in front of me, they may come into my courtroom not knowing whether or not I'm actually going to listen to them or not. I was paid a very nice compliment before I took the trial bench many years ago from a gentleman who currently is the head of the appellate section of the Tarrant County DA's office, and this was before he was there. He said, Wade, we really need a judge like you on the bench, because even though, he goes, we have the hardest time sometimes with judges being able to kind of understand what we're likely to get into. You know, are you somebody who's going to follow the law even if you don't agree with it? Are you somebody who's going to listen to the evidence presented even though you're having to make a credibility determination when you do that? Are you going to give us a fair hearing? And are you going to apply the law? Those are really the things that attorneys want at a basic fairness minimum, okay? There are some attorneys who want to walk in and they've had a long relationship with a judge or something like that, and so they're going to feel like maybe they can get away with a little bit more than others might. But that's actually fairly rare. And most of my colleagues on the trial bench, you know, some not, but most, they really are listening to the evidence that's presented. They really are wanting to know what the law is. And part of what we do on a regular basis is there isn't, oh, this is the same exact factual circumstances which applies the same exact law. That very, very rarely happens, okay? Most of the time we're dealing with, because nobody ever slips and falls the exact same way. Nobody ever, you know, causes an accident or is hurt in an accident the exact same way. Nobody, you know, and so the law are the principles that we apply, but the factual circumstances, sometimes they're similar, but a lot of times they can diverge quite a bit. So again, we're back to, you as an attorney need to explain to me why you think the law that applies under the circumstances should apply a particular way under these factual circumstances. If you don't think the law should apply in a particular way, or if you don't think the law applies at all, you need to explain to me why that is the case, okay? And you need to listen to my questions when I ask you questions, because I'm really trying to figure out what the law is and what the facts of the case are. I ask a lot of questions from the bench. I'm a hot bench. When I was an attorney on the other side of the bench, I always wanted that interaction with the court because it helps me figure out where the court might be going on a particular thing. But you have to do so in a respectful manner. You have to listen to the court's questions. I have to listen to the questions that I'm getting asked. I have to respect the people doing it. I have to, what was the second one again? I just go impartial. I've got to be impartial, or at least be perceived as impartial. One of the things I used to do with juries, I would always tell them at the very beginning, once they were seated, I would tell them, look, one of the things you're going to really want to do, because you don't know anybody in this courtroom, including me, what you're really going to want to do is you're going to be watching me to try and figure out what I think about something. And I said, don't, okay? It is not my job to make a determination of what happened here. You guys get to make the determination of what the facts of this case are. You're the ones who make the determination of what is and is not credible evidence. You can say that all of the evidence presented by one side is credible, none of that evidence is credible, or parts of it are credible and parts of it are not credible. But do not look to me to try and gauge what I think is credible or what I think, you know, should be the finding here, because if I'm doing my job, I'm sitting here looking as disinterested as I possibly can, because y'all's job is to make that determination. My job is to apply the law. Okay? So if you think that during some testimony, and I specifically said this, if you think I rolled my eyes or if I yawned at an opportune moment or something of that nature, and that means something, don't. It doesn't mean anything. It absolutely does not mean anything. And if I'm giving you any kind of signals whatsoever, that is incredibly unethical for me to be doing that. And I love juries. That is honestly, that is the best part of our legal system right now, because it's a bunch of people who don't know each other, who are citizens, who don't really want to be doing what they're doing, but they happen to get picked for the jury. They have different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different political philosophies, all of that, but they generally, and almost 100% of the time, they're trying to get the decision correct, okay? And it is the one part of our self-government that actually works, okay? Sometimes juries will go off the rails, but that is exceedingly rare. Most of the time, they are diligently trying to figure out who's telling the truth and what the truth of circumstances are. So I've gone a little bit too far and gotten into judges. To be a judge, you literally have to love the sound of your own voice. So that's my chief qualification. But again, there's nothing about these four aspects of procedural justice that doesn't fit right in with Jesus' admonition to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Absolutely. And so if I'm putting my thumb on the scale in any way, shape, or form, all right, then that's not procedural justice. That's not impartiality. That also means I wasn't listening, or if I listened, I didn't like what I heard, so I'm going to take it out on them. And that's not respectful, and I'm doing something that is inherently untrustworthy. So anyway, so being a judge has been a great privilege for me, and I would be lying to you if I told you that there were times that I didn't listen. There were never any time that I didn't listen or didn't act, disrespectfully at times, or any of, contrary to any of those four things, okay? Because we're all human. We have our own presuppositions, as you indicated. You walk into something, I've read the briefs, or I know a particular attorney, I'm like, okay, last time he argued something that really wasn't true, so I'm going to be careful with him this time. That happens. But generally, I've been blessed by being able to actually do the things that Leviticus talks about, and hopefully will continue to do so. So let me pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you so very much for the opportunity to come before you to learn about justice, what it means to be just, and to understand that our concept of justice in this country is a Judeo-Christian concept. It extends back to the days of the Torah. And Laura, it just absolutely is a rock solid foundation for not just our judicial system, but for our everyday interaction with individuals who are our brothers and sisters in Christ, but also those individuals who are not. And we just ask, Lord, for the strength and the knowledge that you give us so that we can enter into these interactions in a manner where we listen, where we are trustworthy, where we show respect, where we show impartiality, that we do not come into situations with people who you may want us to minister to witness to, in some type of preconceived notion of who they may be, what they may be doing, that type of thing. Let that be demonstrated through the interaction itself. Don't let us do the preconceptions, because those preconceptions may take us astray from what it is that you actually want us to do and why you have brought us to a point of interaction with these individuals. So we ask for that grace, Lord. We ask for that guidance. And we just thank you for the opportunity to have this approach given to us this evening. And we ask that we be able to use this approach to bring others to you in the future. We ask these things, Lord, in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
We're going to take the Lord's Supper. We'll start passing out the elements right away. Share with us those you've been alive. Take the offering. Go ahead, finish this up.
It's true. I've spent the last month with Marcos, but neither of us have been in town. We went home to Boise for a few weeks, and that was a good visit. And then we were able to take a trip to Costa Rica to meet our new sister-in-law. Well, I say she's new. She's been in the family for a year, but they renewed their vows, and so we had a great time in Costa Rica, finding out just exactly how rusty my Spanish is and how much I desperately need to practice if I'm going to have a cohesive conversation with my sister-in-law. So, we have a cop and a judge in the house and someone in the military, and yeah. It all comes down to the walk. It all comes down to seeking justice and loving mercy and walking humbly with God. And I think that we definitely, while some people are just discovering this, if for those of us who've been studying Scripture, we've heard it before, but it's always good to be reminded to follow God and be respectful to everyone that we come across in our lives. It should just be a few more moments and we'll have all of the elements possibly passed around. Are we ready? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen. Amen. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who brings forth fruit from the vine. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. And I believe we have some oneg this evening. So as soon as we're done here, we will go right around the corner and enjoy some dinner. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yihunecha, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you shalom.